America is urbanized at a rapid and extreme rate, with cities growing outwards and upwards depending on the economy of that area and the density of the city. This has allowed for some of the largest cities in the country to create massive central business districts, or downtowns, with some of the nation's tallest buildings. There's a lot that goes into why this happens, especially economic factors. So today I wanted to get into this topic and talk about each state's tallest building, progressively getting taller and taller until we reach the tallest in the entire nation. So watch this video if you want to see where your state ranks on the tallest buildings. Before we get into that though, make sure you do subscribe to the channel. We make geography content like this every week, and I'm trying to get to my lifelong goal of 100,000 subscribers this year, so if you enjoy the content, click the subscribe button below. Thank you! So looking at the buildings on this list and whether a state will place highly or not, it mostly has to do with the largest city in each state. It ends up really coming down to the top cities in the country, but how we get up to that is what interests me. The definition of a skyscraper is around 450 feet tall, so it's yet another interesting thing to look at to basically find out which states have a skyscraper and which don't, and then why that is. But without further ado, let's get on with the states. Now, not thinking about US territories and such, we jump straight into it with Vermont, home of Decker's Tower, an 124-foot residential building in the city of Burlington. Continuing on, we have the Wyoming Financial Center in Cheyenne, Wyoming, the 148-foot office building. Wyoming is the nation's least populated state, so I see no surprise there. In 48th, we have South Dakota's CenturyLink Tower in downtown Sioux Falls, an 174-foot office building. Next though, we move to what I believe is the most interesting entry onto our list, with St. Joseph's Church in Maine. So this church is located in Biddeford, Maine, a sister city to Saco near Old Orchard Beach. Not only is the area home to Interstate 195, one of my favorite useless interstates, but I guess it's also home to the only church that serves as a state's tallest building. The massive steeple stretches 235 feet in the air, and it was built in 1870, making it also the oldest entry on our list. There's a lot that makes this very unique for the video, but I personally find it very interesting that it's located just outside of downtown Biddeford, a city of 22,000 in Maine. It's nothing special, yet it found its way onto this list. Okay, so continuing on, we have the North Dakota State Capitol building in Bismarck, the first of a couple Capitol buildings found on this list. The building was made after the original one burnt down in 1930. This new one was built with a large 242-foot building basically jutting into it. Next is the First Interstate Center in Billings, Montana, a 272-foot office building in Billings, which is the state's largest city in terms of population. Into 44th place, we have the City Hall Plaza in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire. This office building just beat out Montana, up at 275 feet, and it's actually pretty large. Next up, we have our second Capitol building, being the West Virginia State Capitol building in Charleston, at 293 feet. This building isn't meant to be massive, but the state simply doesn't have many other tall buildings across their major cities. Into 42nd place, we have the ConocoPhillips building in Anchorage, Alaska, being part of the city's quite sizable downtown at 296 feet. Speeding up a bit, we move over 300 feet tall with the 8th and Main office building in downtown Boise, Idaho, at 323 feet. In 40th, we have the Beau Rivage Casino Hotel in Biloxi, Mississippi, a fun entry onto this list. The building is massive, being a pretty cool view from the Shuckers Stadium. In South Carolina, we have the Capitol Center in downtown Columbia at 349 feet. In New Mexico, we have the Albuquerque Plaza, in Albuquerque, obviously. A supremely unimpressive office building. Sorry, New Mexico viewers, but realistically there aren't that many of you. In 37th, we have the unnamed 1201 North Market Street building in Wilmington, Delaware. Sorry to throw another punch, but having an unnamed tallest building is a very Delaware thing to do. The Epic Center in Wichita is Kansas's tallest building at 385 feet. And in Providence, Rhode Island, we have the Industrial National Bank building, which is actually a really pretty tower, built 428 feet in the air in 1927. And then we have our 34th place entry, the Central Ala Moana building, a residential tower in Honolulu, Hawaii, up at 435 feet. Now we hit a big mark, and even though it doesn't feel like it, this is an important spot, because every building for the rest of the list now counts as a skyscraper by almost every definition. So with that, 33rd place is Astra Tower in Salt Lake City, a residential building finished just last year in 2024. In 32nd is the Chase Tower in Phoenix, Arizona, a city that has a very short skyline for its size, at 483 feet. In Virginia, we have an interesting one, with the Westin Virginia Beach Town Center, a hotel built in 2007 at 508 feet tall. In Maryland, we have the 100 Light Building, a 529-foot Baltimore office building, which is disappointingly shorter than the City Place in Hartford, Connecticut, which is 535 feet. In 28th place, Little Rock, Arkansas' Simmons Tower takes the cake, a 546-foot office building. And the Wells Fargo Center of Portland, Oregon comes in the next spot. Side note, I love how the Wells Fargo Center looks. Big fan, Portland. Anyway, moving on, Kentucky finds their way into the top 30 with 400 West Market in Louisville, a 549-foot building which ends our bottom half. So here we are at the halfway point as we move into our top half of states. Most of these bring us to some of America's largest cities. So I actually think it's interesting if you pay attention to which cities are finding their way onto the top 25 and why this is happening. So starting out is my home state of Wisconsin with the U.S. Bank Center at 601 feet. Milwaukee has proposed the Neutral Project, a new skyscraper that would be 613 feet though, so this may change at some point. Next is the AT&T building in Nashville, Tennessee at 617 feet. We move into the Midwest with the One Kansas City Place in Kansas City, Missouri, a 624-foot office building. Continuing our run, we have the 801 Grand in Des Moines, Iowa, at 630 feet. And the First National Bank Tower in Omaha, Nebraska, at 634 feet. I find it interesting these three Great Plains states beat out somewhere like Nashville or Milwaukee. In 20th is the Hancock Whitney Center in New Orleans, Louisiana, at 697 feet. But we move right back into the Midwest in 19th place with the Salesforce Tower in Indianapolis, Indiana, at 701 feet. Colorado takes 18th place with the Republic Plaza in the growing large city of Denver, built in 1984 at 714 feet tall. Into 17th place, nearing the top, we get into some interesting ones, this time with the Renaissance Center in Detroit, Michigan, a very futuristic-looking 727th building. In 16th, then, we have the Fontainebleau Las Vegas in Nevada, a massive 735-foot hotel and casino located outside of downtown Las Vegas, instead being on the Strip. This isn't as tall as the RSA Battle House Tower in Mobile, Alabama, a 745-foot office building built in 2007. That makes you wonder why Mobile has a tower taller than Las Vegas or Detroit. Moving on, though, we have the John Hancock Tower in Boston, Massachusetts, at 790 feet. And in 13th, we have the large IDS Tower in downtown Minneapolis, Minnesota, a city with a very respectable skyline. Into 12th place, we have the Devon Energy Tower in Oklahoma, which is interesting because Oklahoma City has a relatively small skyline besides this tower, so it sort of towers above the rest of the city and feels out of place. What's even more interesting is the city proposed the Legends Tower, a 1,907-foot tower that would be the tallest in the nation if built. The Oklahoma City skyline would look fascinating if there were two buildings significantly taller than the rest. Moving on, we have the Panorama Tower in Miami, Florida, a mixed-use building built in 2018, which is 868 feet tall. Charlotte, North Carolina steals the 10th place spot, though, with the Bank of America Corporate Center, the 871-foot office building. This is part of Charlotte's very nice skyline, being built in 1992 when Charlotte was spiking in population. In 9th, we have the 99 Hudson in Jersey City, New Jersey, pushing us to 900 feet. The tower is part of New Jersey's side of the New York skyline, and it was built in 2019, being mostly residential. Moving to 8th, we have the Columbia Center in Seattle, Washington, a beautiful tower up at 933 feet that serves as part of Seattle's very nice skyline that works with the Space Needle to create a nice area. In 7th, then, we have the Key Tower in Cleveland, Ohio, a 947-foot office building. This building was built in 1991, being newer than Washington's entry, which is interesting because of the place Cleveland was in the 90s, which was very different from Seattle, obviously. Anyways, as we get to 6th place, we pass 1,000 feet and get to the nation's tallest buildings, with the JP Morgan Chase Tower in Houston, Texas, at 1,002 feet. Honestly, I could see Texas finding itself higher on this list, with everyone saying things are bigger in Texas. But I assume because of the urban sprawl, there's less requirement for large downtown buildings. Into our top 5, we have the Bank of America Plaza in Atlanta, Georgia, the 1,023-foot office building that was built in 1992 as part of Atlanta's skyline, which has continued to grow. The tallest building in the city does serve as its main tall landmark, though. In 4th, we have Los Angeles' Wilshire Grand Center. This building, up at 1,100 feet, is a hotel and office, built in 2017, and it adds to Los Angeles' skyline. Most people have thought of this city's skyline as a lot smaller than it could be, but being in 4th place for this list really isn't that bad for a city of its size, so it must be more about the overall density rather than the top height. Into the top 3, we move to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania with the Comcast Technology Center. Philly has a really awesome skyline, which I saw when I visited the city. It's so interesting to look at from a distance, and I really think you can tell the Comcast Tower is 1,121 feet tall, as it stands out from the landscape below. It was built in 2018, and it's an office building. So then into 2nd place, what do we have? Well, it's Illinois with Willis Tower, formerly known as Sears Tower. We take a massive jump with this one up to 1,451 feet tall. It was built in 1974, and at that time, it was the tallest building in the world. It held that title for almost 20 years, but it was passed as other cities began to expand outwards in the Middle East, as well as obviously the building that is coming next on our list. So what is that tower? Well, it's a pretty easy guess for 1st place, being the One World Trade Center in New York City, with the state of New York taking the cake. The building needs no introduction, being an amazing example of America's best infrastructure, towering 1,776 feet, and being built in 2014. I do want to stop for a moment and think about how insane it would be if the Legends Tower in Oklahoma City was actually built. So you go past Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Chicago, and New York, and all these massive cities, and then you'd see Oklahoma City at the top of the list. But for now, that's not the case, and it's instead the One World Trade Center. I love looking at large skylines in the country. They're so beautiful and tell you so much about how the country has developed and the greatness of the American economy. These cities continue to grow as well, with several new skyscrapers above 1,000 feet being proposed across the country. This list might be way different in 20 years. We'll see how the country continues to develop in downtowns with the prevalence of suburbs in today's cities. Thanks for watching. Thank you to the members this week: Stephen Phillips, CJ Brick, Big Pasty, Resident Contrarian, Hazev the Wolf, Bunny, Honoshukin, Brock Sanders, Steve Priestman, SB Wilder, Florida Jake, Sir JC17, Alex Williams, Mikita Martinoff, Kurt Ainsley, Jerome McCall, KMS162, JL, Bryson, Rosebud 4, Darkbird, Wolfling73, Snyder Schweins, Benjamin Whitings, and Ryan Devins. I appreciate you all so much. I have a City Skylines video recorded, so I don't know exactly when that'll get uploaded, but there is some private members-only content coming soon. So if you're watching this and you're thinking about becoming a member, that's a sort of incentive to do that if you want to see some private content. So thank you all very much.